First of all, I just congratulations. I just had the chance to watch the film. It's really beautiful and heartfelt. And congratulations on having your short film premiere at TIFF. How does it feel?
I mean, it's amazing. It's you know, TIFF is such a kind of incredible festival for filmmakers, especially here in Toronto. And you know, it's a bizarre year. Obviously, we worked on this film for 5 years, and it's sort of odd to be like putting it out in the world in 2020 of all years. But it also feels kind of thematically timely. I've been watching a lot of the short films in the programs, and there is a running theme. There is a theme of grief and loss and uncertainty and human connection. So it kind of feels appropriate that we're here in this bizarre year.
Can you talk a bit about the importance of having this festival as a platform for local filmmakers?
TIFF in general, it's been interesting. I guess Jordan and I have both been around Toronto long enough that we've seen TIFF go from an interesting and sort of respected festival to this great big extravaganza that it is now, and so it's I think I mean, just the status of the festival and the reach it has is obviously very important for filmmakers, and that it has such a refined and serious commitment to short filmmaking is I think really speaks well of the integrity of the festival, in that it despite its size and scope, it has not lost sight of the importance of short works, not just as sort of springboards into feature, but as an art form unto itself, I think.
Jordan, you wrote the story, so it's very personal to you. So can you talk a bit about the inspiration and vision for this?
Yeah. Well, this was a sort of long time coming. It grew initially out of sort of these notes that I had taken from some stories that my mom had told me, a combination of stories of growing up on Amherst Island in Ontario when she was a little girl. These recurring stories about animals and death, in particular this one story about a snake. And they just always stuck with me, and I didn't know exactly what to do with them. I just had them in a little folder. And then it sort of got combined with these experiences of hospitals. One of my mom going kind of through the loss of her dad, sort of being by his bedside as he passed away. And then my own experiences spending a lot of time in hospitals with a partner who was going through cancer. And so these ideas all just sort of percolated together, and at one point kind of blended into this idea I had about, like, what if my mom and myself could have somehow crossed paths in a hospital during these two very different but difficult and lonely times in our lives, when we were both kind of going through these experiences on our own. What if we could have connected, even just for a moment, and sort of shared a little bit of comfort with one another? And so anyway, those are sort of the ideas that all sort of came together in this script years and years ago that I brought to the National Film Board. And I just didn't know what to do with it. I didn't think I thought it would have been a kind of corny live action, which is usually what I work in is live action. But it seemed to feel better as an animation, and the NFB was extremely supportive and agreed and really helped kind of foster it. And, you know, eventually we found a wonderful Howie Shia, and he reacted positively to the script, which is good. And so we teamed up about 5 years ago and sort of started making it.
Howie, the animation is so beautiful, especially the fleeting scenes between the hospital and her childhood. So can you talk about cultivating this unique animation style and your influences?
A lot of it started with actually initial drawings that or paintings, reference paintings that Jordan had sort of compiled as inspiration pieces, and I think the thing that really struck a chord for me, and obviously struck a chord for Jordan, was that a lot of the painters that she had sort of gathered were from, or like Egon Schiele and Clinton and stuff, is that there's this sort of very stark difference between the flesh and the rest of the material in the drawings, and that it made sense to me, I think, that we would accentuate the difference between the flesh in a hospital and everything else, which is so sterile and so flat and so clean. And so that was sort of the starting point of we wanted to separate out that. And then the memories, I think, we definitely wanted to make sure that it felt tactile in a way that the hospital couldn't be, and kind of messy in the way the hospital couldn't be. Partly because memory is that way, and I think partly because of the emotion of those scenes. It made sense to be tactile but unclear, something you could, and then
Fluid.
yeah, and I think there was just a sense of wanting to sort of have a feeling of like old Super 8 footage or stuff like that, but without being kind of kitschy and nostalgic. So that sort of painterly look was sort of arrived at with that kind of thinking in mind.
And I think one other thing I'd add too, which Howie really, I think, did brilliantly to contrast the present day hospital minutia. Like that was something Howie and I both really had strong feelings about hospitals, was sort of like, the longer you spend in them, the more details you start, the more sort of like boring details you notice, the sounds and just the smells and how everything is just sort of dead in a way, it's not living. And you start to notice every single little thing. And with the memories, he created this sense of being able to sort of jump through to these really potent spark moments. So you don't see every single frame in between when the fish catches. It's the sort of burst of the fish coming out of the water and the sound of it hitting in the boat, and sort of just those parts of the memories that really resonate and stick with you. You don't remember every single little thing in between. And that's what is so overbearing about the hospital, is that you can't sort of escape the in-between stuff. But there's a sort of freedom and life in the memory sequences where you're just sort of grabbing the things that stuck with you the most.
This is the first time the two of you are collaborating together, right? So how did this come together?
I wrote the script and I brought it to the NFB, and the film board, I didn't know this before, really much before I kind of wrote the script, that the NFB would do a partnership like this, sort of pair a non-animating director and writer with an animator and foster the collaboration. And I had worked on something with Annette Clark with the NFB in another way, sort of giving notes on a script on a similar type of collaboration. And so, yeah, when I brought it to them, we started having conversations about, what kind of animation, it's something that I had never really conceived of, what does it look like? You don't normally have to think about that when you're just casting actors and finding locations. So we started looking at animators and styles of animation. And John Montez, also at the NFB, sent a list with Howie's name kind of with big asterisks next to it at the top of the list. And yeah, when I watched Howie's shorts, I watched Bam and some of his other works, it was not at all like the animation I would have ever had in my head, which granted was very sort of vague and blurry anyway. But it just spoke to me, the way that he expressed character and emotion in this really sort of kind of stark, oh, Howie's gone, this sort of stark, almost graphic way, graphic novel or comic book. I don't know. He's not here to defend the adjectives I'm using. Maybe this is the way, but that's how I sort of saw it, almost like a comic book.
What I found very interesting was the moment of connection at the end. I think that was the most moving part for me, just to see that. What are you hoping really that, especially given now during the pandemic, what are you hoping viewers will get to take away from
I mean, I always, before I send it to anyone, I always do give a bit of a disclaimer, like, it is sad. You know, be prepared. It's not a comedy. And you will hopefully feel something. So maybe watch it when you're like not feeling particularly fragile. But, you know, we've been making this for 5 years, and the experiences that I had, you know, in hospitals, are, you know, they feel far away in a lot of ways. And then they can also just sort of feel so present and so near at hand. And I think a lot of that has to do, obviously, with what is going on in the world and what we've all been going through over the course of this insane year. So I do think, you know, I think loss and fear and grief are all very near at hand right now. We're all feeling this sort of overwhelming sense of, you know, potential loss, you know, loss of life, of livelihood, of family members, and distance. I haven't seen my family since the beginning of the year. You know, I'm not allowed to go see them in Newfoundland currently. And what I hope that people get from the film, not only is it, I hope it resonates with people and their own feelings of, you know, their own experiences of loss and grief. But what I hope with that moment at the end, especially, is that now more than ever, human connection is what we all crave and need the most, and that it can be found in a stranger or in a fleeting passing moment with somebody on the street, or, you know, I hope that we can find that comfort where we can, and not, you know, be completely weighed down by the fact that we're not able to sort of see everybody we want to see, or hug them, or be close to them right now. So I hope that there is a hopeful moment at the end, and not completely, you know, not everybody's just so bummed out once they finish it.
I gotta say, and to Jordan's point, I think we should at this moment realize, especially, I think, that we should actually be so lucky as to be in the hospital with our loved ones as they move on. I think, as sad as it is, it's and as unsatisfying a closure it will inevitably always be. We should take those moments for what they are, as an opportunity, as one more chance to be with the people you love.
Well, it is definitely a very moving film, and I hope everyone else gets to see it at TIFF as well. Thank you so much for the chat. I'm wishing you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.